Hi everyone, I'm outside of my house today, but wanted to come and share Easter Sunday with you. So I have my own set of Easter eggs here today. Do you have one at your house? Everything's a little bit different this year, so we didn't get to do some of the special things at church that we wanted to, but I have a very special set of Easter eggs with me today. And I wanted to tell you a story. It's in all four of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. But most of what I'm sharing with you today is in the book of Matthew. So I wanted to share you. I have these eggs that are going to help me tell the story. So hopefully I can remember everything that way with visual props here. So in my first egg, I have a donkey. That comes to us from last week's story. If you remember, Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey. Remember, that's not what most kings would have ridden. He came in on a donkey because he didn't want glory and praise for that. He wanted glory and praise because he was God's son, and he wanted to show us how much he loved us. So we talked about that last week. Well, the week that followed has been very busy, and if we read all through Matthew, I'm starting in Matthew 21 when I'm talking about the donkey, but let's jump to Matthew 26. Remember, Jesus traveled with his disciples, and he asked them to all meet together for a very special dinner together. We call it the Lord's Supper because the Lord was there. So inside this egg, I have a cup. Now, we don't usually drink out of cups exactly like this anymore, but this might be what it looked like in Bible times. And so this cup, our parents celebrate the Lord's Supper in big church sometimes, and they have bread that represents Jesus's body, and they have juice that represents his blood. And when we're back together, we'll do that too, and let you guys get to take part in that celebration. But 2,000 years ago, Jesus had this meal with the disciples, and they didn't understand everything that he was telling them, but he was trying to let them know what was coming in just a few short days, that was their last big meal together, and that they that his time on earth was coming to an end. So that was the cup that helps me. Let's see what's in this egg. Kind of jingles a little bit. Inside, there's some coins. Well, you might not remember all 12 of the disciples' names, but there was one named Judas, and he was one of Jesus's friends too. All of the disciples spent so much time with Jesus. They had seen him perform so many miracles, but Judas just started doing the wrong thing. He started worrying about money and found a way to make some money. Remember those people I told you about that didn't like Jesus getting all of that praise, and how they were trying to find a way to stop Jesus from earning that praise? Well, Judas decided to take some money from some of those Pharisees and Roman officials, and he decided to trade that. And the people were going to give him coins, some silver, and he was going to point out which one in the group was Jesus so that they could arrest him. So Judas was not Jesus's friend. And at the Lord's Supper, when they were having that meal together, Jesus even announced that one of the disciples was going to do that. And they couldn't believe it. They didn't want to believe that either. But Jesus knew everything that was going to happen. Let's see what's next. These are praying hands. So that represents the prayer that Jesus had the night before that he was arrested. The disciples and he went into the garden, and it was late, and Jesus knew what was about to happen. He had tried to explain it to the disciples too, but they fell asleep. They were tired. They just fell asleep in the garden. But Jesus prayed and he prayed. He prayed to God, and he even asked him to take what was about to happen away. But then he came back and said, if this is what has to happen, if this is your will, then let it be done. Jesus woke the disciples up a couple times, and you know what? They kept falling back asleep again. It's terrible. You ever done that when you weren't supposed to? Well, this one, jumps a little bit ahead in our story, so you get to look at it for just a minute. But Jesus in the garden was arrested. Judas was with the officials, and he went and kissed Jesus on the forehead so that they would know which one was him, and the guards arrested Jesus. The disciples were so upset they didn't want him to. They tried to fight off the guards, but Jesus told them not to, that this was what God had intended and what he had planned. So he was arrested. As he was dragged through the crowd several different times. Remember, this is the crowd that had been waving palm branches and shouting Hosanna just a few days before. But now the crowd had turned on him, and we're going to talk a couple parts of that story. But Peter, one of Jesus's best friends, pretended not to know Jesus. He was scared. When Jesus was arrested, he didn't want to be known as somebody that was one of Jesus's followers and Jesus's friends. He was worried they might arrest him too. That would be scary, wouldn't it, to think that you were going to be arrested and beaten and hurt and maybe even killed? Peter was worried, and Jesus, though, had told him that before the rooster crowed, he would deny him 3 times that night. Peter was shocked at that time. He could not believe that. He loved Jesus. No one could make him do that, is what he thought. But Jesus was right. And by the time the rooster crowed, he had pretended not to know Jesus 3 different times that night. Let's see what's in the next one. Oh, this one makes me sad. This is a little bit different. You might not recognize what it is. It's a whip. And it was meant to really hurt somebody. So this they would use for prisoners. Remember, Jesus was arrested, but Jesus had never done anything wrong. But that's what was happening to him. He was being beaten, his back was bleeding, and it tells us in the Bible how hurt he was when they were hitting him with the whip and hurting him. But Pontius Pilate was the Roman governor at that time, and he didn't want to be a part of that. He was a little nervous being in charge of Jesus being hurt and being put in prison and being killed, and so he thought he had a plan. He offered it up to the people. He said, you know what? It's our turn to let one person out of prison. So do you want it to be Barabbas, or do you want it to be Jesus? And he thought for sure everyone would choose Jesus, because surely they wouldn't want Jesus to be killed. But those same people who had just been praising him and shouting Hosanna, they turned on Jesus too, and they yelled for Jesus to be crucified and to let Barabbas go. So Jesus was the one that was whipped and hurt. Let's see. So I think you probably know this part of the story. Jesus had to carry a cross, a big wooden cross, up this giant hill and wait for them to nail him to the cross. But he did that because he loved us. He could have asked an angel to come down and save him anytime. He could have begged God to stop this so that he wasn't hurt. But the nails put him in the cross. But we like to say that it's the love that he had for us that held him up on the cross, because he chose to do that. So that's another sad part of the story. The people that were putting him on the cross, they were making fun of Jesus. They were taunting him, hoping that he would try to get off the cross and to say that he was really not the King and Lord of Lords. And so they made a crown out of thorns. You ever felt a thorn like on a rose bush? It's really sharp and it makes you bleed if it pokes in your skin. Well, they made a crown like that, not a crown of jewels, but a crown of thorns, and they pressed it hard into his head so that it would hurt and so that blood would come down his forehead. They were so mean to our Lord. That night, Jesus died on the cross. there were two other men who were being crucified as well. They had been doing things that were really bad. They had sinned and had committed crimes and were in jail for a reason. But Jesus promised them, that one of them that asked to be forgiven, that he would be able to be in heaven with him that night as well. Well, Jesus died though on the cross. And the Bible tells us that it became dark and that he just took his last breath, but they had been teasing him and taunting him that whole time. And then in the Bible it tells us that they poked him in the side with a spear and his blood drained one more time. Isn't that so sad? Well, some friends of Jesus got together, and one special man used a tomb that he had. Remember, we talked about a tomb last week when we talked about Lazarus and how it was a big, like, open cave. And this friend Joseph wrapped him in linen cloth and they put him in the tomb. And then this one comes right afterwards. There was a giant stone. Now this is not a giant stone. I can easily pick it up, but can you imagine just a giant rock that is so heavy that lots and lots of people had to work together to move it and block it? Well, the Roman officials were so worried that somebody was going to come and take Jesus's body that they wanted soldiers guarding the grave. They didn't want anything happening to it. And so that's what happened. Jesus was inside the stone, inside the cave. The stone was blocking it, and Roman officials were there. But the good news is that's not where the story ends. He's not dead. When 3 days had passed, Mary and had gone to the tomb to see him the next morning, and it was custom after a few days that they would wrap the body and they would cover it with perfume, the body with perfume. And so they were going to the tomb just to do that, to take care of it, to show honor to their friend Jesus. And they got to the tomb. There's nothing in here. There's nothing in my egg. I don't know where. Oh, there's nothing in it because the tomb was empty. They got there and the stone had been rolled away. Who could have done that? It was so heavy and so big. Only God could have done that. The tomb was empty and Jesus wasn't there, but the cloth was there. Whoops, I lost my cloth. There it is. The cloth was laying there and nothing else. Mary was scared. They didn't know what in the world had happened. And an angel appeared to him and told him it's okay not to be afraid. Remember, that's a common thing that the angel would say first thing when they appeared to someone, that they didn't need to be afraid, that Jesus had risen and that he was alive. So they ran off to tell the disciples as fast as they could. They were so excited and so scared and so nervous, not understanding completely. So they went to tell the disciples, but it started making a little bit more sense. All the things that Jesus had told them and all the things that our Bible tells us up until that point. We've been talking in kids' church for months now about how things are prophesied in the Bible. Jesus was the answer to so many of those prophecies early in the Bible, matched exactly what had been said. They started to understand that Jesus was exactly who he said he was, that he was the Son of God and is the Son of God, and that only he could have done such a miracle, and only he loved us enough to do that. I hope you remember that. It's fine if you have Easter candy to celebrate this morning and get to have time with your family. Those are all fun things to do. But make sure you're spending time today thanking God for the incredible gift he gave us on Easter Sunday so many years ago. I love you guys. I can't wait to see you soon. Remember, Jesus loves you more than you can